Hey, everybody. Welcome to Ed on the Edge. I am so pleased we have the opportunity today to visit with Rajen Sheth, who is the founder of Kyron Learning. Full disclosure, GSV Ventures is a proud investor in Kyron, but doing extraordinarily exciting things in the online learning space. And so welcome, Rajen.
Thank you, Michael. Great to be here. Really appreciate it.
So before we talk about Kyron, let's talk about kind of your journey to being a founder here. You
Yeah,
grew up in Colorado.
that's
You
right.
can see from the back you're a Broncos fan.
Yep, exactly. Signed
And then,
practice football.
and then how did you get to Stanford University, where you got both your undergrad and your master's in computer science? Talk about
Yeah,
what was that about,
yeah,
and then the natural transition to Silicon Valley.
yeah. No, Stanford was really my dream place to go. And growing up, I grew up in a family of engineers and entrepreneurs. And my both my parents were engineers. My mom was actually the first woman to graduate with electrical engineering in her state in India. And both of them came to the U.S. Really with that dream of figuring out how to really innovate. Both of them were engineers for a long time, and my dad ended up starting a company. And so I kind of saw that whole journey. And what I loved about Stanford is that it really, for those two things, for engineering and entrepreneurship, it was the best place to be. And it was just a phenomenal atmosphere, phenomenal culture. And so, I was lucky enough to get into my dream school and went to Stanford and did electrical engineering, computer science there. And I think one of the biggest things for me was then really learning about entrepreneurship there. There were some amazing programs that I got to go through that taught me about what it means to be an entrepreneur and what it means to really kind of change the world in Silicon Valley. I was also fortunate that that was right during kind of the mid 90s, basically. I got to Stanford in 1994, right when the first web browser started to come out. And all of a sudden, everything around the internet exploded at Stanford, and that was the epicenter of things like Yahoo and Google and all of these other companies. And so, really, kind of grew up in that era, and that continued that into my professional career. And so, started off at Microsoft for a little while, but then really got the bug to go to smaller companies, and so went to a startup after that, and then ultimately ended up at VMware for a while, and then ended up at Google for a very long time, for about 17 years, and really kind of my career really grew up at Google.
Talk about VMware for just a second. So when you joined VMware, how big was it? And Diane Green, who I'm a gigantic fan of and had the pleasure of spending some time with, what was she like as a CEO and leader?
Yeah, she was a fantastic innovator. And what was interesting with VMware is that, VMware did really well in a time in the industry where a lot of things weren't doing very well. And they did that because of two things. One was incredible technical skill. They had an incredible engineering team that was very, very innovative. But the other thing was an obsession with customers and really kind of figuring out what was the customer need, how they could fill it, how they could really delight the customer. When I got to VMware, it was probably, it still remains probably the best run organization I've ever been a part of.
Wow.
And what was interesting about it is that I was a product manager there. I started talking to the customers, and you could see how passionate the customers were. And it gave me that benchmark of this is what a product should be like. If a product can make these customers this passionate about the product, then you know you're in the right place with that. And so it was probably the best place for me to learn how to be a product manager and what the definition of a good product is.
And what prompted you to go to Google?
So Google was an interesting opportunity that honestly came out of the blue because we talked about kind of being an entrepreneur. I really wanted to start something from the ground up. And I was very interested as well in enterprise software, and particularly enterprise, because you could really change how the world operates. You can bring things to companies, and you can change how those companies operated with technology. Google was never into enterprise technologies, and in fact, I interviewed with Google the previous year and actually decided to go to VMware instead because of that. Google decided in 2004 to start the enterprise group, which is what eventually became Google Cloud. And so they called me up and said, like, hey, actually, now we are starting something in enterprise. We hired a general manager for that. Would you like to come and be a product manager with us? And so I jumped at that opportunity to help kind of start something from scratch, which was much, much tougher, but then was incredibly, incredibly rewarding and guided the rest of my career.
And at Google, AI was part of the DNA really from the beginning. People,
Yeah.
you were doing AI before people knew how to spell it. Um,
Yep.
what was some of the kind of key early learnings of how to use AI in enterprise to improve productivity?
Yeah, it evolved a lot over time. It started with things that now seem simple, but were very complex at the time. Things like spam filters, for example. We use some really interesting algorithms in our spam filter to make Gmail a much better application. The particular area that I was focused on was what's now called Google Workspace, which at the time was called Google Apps, and that's basically Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Docs, all of those for enterprise and for education. And that's where I think we really saw, one, web technologies and kind of how that can really change how people can be productive, working on a document simultaneously, for example. That's also where we saw the beginnings of AI. I think one of the ones that I remember the most that was, a real aha for me about productivity was priority inbox in Gmail. So, we all get bazillions of messages every day, and probably, 30% of those messages are worth reading. And we created something with Gmail called Priority Inbox that used kind of the early forms of AI to figure out what's important and what's not. And it saved me personally so much time. And I think it then saved Gmail users a ton of time after that. And it was that aha that if you can get the computer to be intelligent and to think on your behalf and to help you, you can be a lot more productive as a result.
I believe one of the nicknames that you received was the Godfather of Google Apps. So, which
That's right.
is quite a reference. But and as things evolved, being ultimately VP of Google Cloud AI, what were some of the key things that you were doing at the time that you're both most excited about, and then how it's influenced kind of your mindset today?
Yeah, there were a couple of things that I think were really critical there. So I took over leading the product group there in 2017, and you think about 2017, it doesn't seem that long ago, but it actually in AI years was way long ago.
Right.
And if you think about what AI was like then, you needed people that had a PhD in AI to really build anything with AI. And the thing that we realized in that group, particularly what we were doing, is trying to figure out how you can apply AI to varieties of different industries and different types of organizations. And we wanted to do two things. One was democratize AI, make it so that everyone could access AI and everyone could build with AI.
Hmm.
And then the second thing was to solve real problems. There's a lot with AI that's really cool and whiz bang, but there are certain things where it's going to actually make a massive difference for customers and make people more productive, help people get to where they want to get to, and those were the kinds of things that we figured out. We built the AI platform with all of that in mind, so that AI could be accessible by anyone. But then we also looked at different industries and figured out, in retail, here are the ways that you can use AI that makes the customer experience even better. Here are the ways that you can use AI in a contact center that makes it, easier to handle more inquiries. Those kinds of things were the places where AI really took off because it was solving a real problem.
And so 2021, you finally have the opportunity to kind of scratch your entrepreneurial itch you had forever, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
What was sort of the catalyst to have you leave Google after 17 years and start Kyron Learning?
Yeah, there were a couple things that were there, and you're right. It was kind of a long time coming because I went into college wanting to start a company, and that was 1994. And I was fortunate to have gotten into a lot of really good paths along the way, and so never ended up doing it. But ended up finally in 2021 deciding to leave Google and do this. There were two things that really kind of prompted me to do this. One was a life stage thing. I kind of realized, okay, if I'm going to do this, I got to do it now. And if I'm not going to do it now, it may never happen. And so decided finally, okay, I got to take the leap and just try it. Being an entrepreneur is scary. It's very scary. It's, you're jumping off into the complete unknown and trying to kind of make something out of thin air. And I realized how much harder it was than trying to actually create something at Google. So that gave me pause for a long time. And finally, I realized, okay, I got to go do it. Second thing was education. What I was seeing post pandemic in education was there were so many people who did not have access to great education. And we had to go online during COVID, and there was a lot that technology helped helped kind of create there. But then there was also a lot left to be desired there in terms of how effectively you could scale education to everyone. And I also started to look at this and see, in K through 12, achievement rates were plummeting post-COVID, and students were multiple years behind. If you looked at higher education, there's only a small percentage of people in the U.S. that have a four-year college degree, but the importance of a college degree is enormous in this country in particular. Those are the kinds of problems I really wanted to solve, and so finally decided to kind of take the leap and really focus on equitable access to education. AI also played a big role in that because I started to see the maturity of what was happening. We were just starting to work on large language models at Google at that time, and I started to see, if you play this forward 2 years, how amazing some of these things that were just in their infancy could become, and that is what ended up happening. And so I feel like I ended up joining at the right time with the right technology to help solve some of the problems that are there in education.
And so you described some of those problems, poor results, unequal access. One of the things that I know that is a big part of your proposition is you can't learn if you're not engaged. And AI has this opportunity to personalize learning, create it more relevant, more targeted for how a person actually learns. How are you doing that? How difficult is it to do? And what are some of the case examples you have how it's working?
So I think one of the things when generative AI first started to come out, and I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is that when generative AI right now is used with learning, a lot of what students are using it for right now are to get an answer, and trying to figure out, how do they understand something. And so it's more information retrieval. For AI to be really used to educate, you need to really meet the student where they are. And a few things that we discovered about students that aren't getting it or need help with the concept is, one, they don't have questions. They don't have something that they can go ask a chatbot because they don't get the concept to begin with. So how do you take a student from there and lead them on the journey towards understanding? And then in the background, help evaluate where do they need more help with this. And I think that's where AI has a lot that can be done. And that's really where we focus with Kyron Learning. How do you use AI to teach as opposed to just answer? And then the other part of that, as you said, Michael, is really engagement. How do you engage a student? And one of the things we know is that students are engaged with visual experiences, and students are engaged when they're being active and not just passive. And so what we've really been focused on is, can we create a conversational video platform and make it such that we can create videos that feel like an engaging video, but a video that you can talk to, where we're teaching a little bit, we're asking just the right question at the right time to the student, and we're talking with them back and forth to get them to a level of understanding. And in the background, we're understanding where they have misconceptions, where they need additional help, and things like that. And that has really resonated. In particular, where that's resonated is higher education. What we've seen is that a lot of higher ed institutions are either online or they want to go online so that they can reach more students and really kind of close that gap of access. But the problem is that online experiences are very one way right now. And so what we're trying to do is take the one way experience and make it a two-way experience. We've seen some really great results. Western Governors University has been using this in a variety of courses. In particular, they've been using this in their Intro to Python course. And the student reaction has been phenomenal. 97% plus of the students have raved about the solution. 80+% say that they've understood more as a result of it. They want more of these, and that it's really showing kind of the engagement level that you can get with students with that. Another one we're proud of is Miami-Dade College. So Miami-Dade College is 76% plus Latino, many folks that are first generation in college. And they want to be able to reach as many students as they can. And they're using our technologies to improve their online presence and make it so that it is a more interactive experience. And in their case, help teach students in areas like English, for example, and now going into areas like math and computer science going forward. And so I think we can really turn that online experience into something that feels more like the classroom.
Yeah, I think very interesting example with Miami-Dade. They've integrated this into the experience where literally, I believe it's part of what you're trying to check the box. Do you want to have this access to, with their online experience, right? I mean, I saw your presentation at our summit, which is terrific with the Miami-Dade person. But you can just sort of see how this becomes a core way how people are going to learn, right?
Yeah. What I'm hoping is that this becomes what online learning should be, and really makes it so that as a result of that, you can scale online learning effectively to nearly everybody.
Right. And I think one of the challenges, I mean, just thinking of from a model standpoint, some of the difficulty that you have to deliver this experience, the internet model is really a broadcast model, right?
Hmm.
It's very little interactive. You're basically receiving information, maybe a little bit of input. Here, it's truly a conversation, an active dialogue. So talk about some of the challenges of what just to achieve that. And then from a business model perspective, because clearly the goal here is to really scale that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
talk about some of those two issues, if you could.
Yeah, there are a bunch of challenges here. I think there's a market challenge and there's a technology challenge. And on the other hand, there are some tailwinds that are there. So the technology challenge that's interesting is that the technology stack is still so bleeding edge and so nascent, but it's evolving massively rapidly. So if you look at we actually literally started Chiron 3 years ago today. And
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's great. It's amazing to see. It feels like 10 years and not 3 years because so much has happened in that time.
Right, right.
And at the time, if you think about it, May of 2022, there was no real generative AI. Like some people were using GPT as an API. There was no chat GPT. And all of that came in afterwards. And so the technology stack has evolved massively since when we first started. In fact, we weren't using generative AI at all for nearly the first year of our history, and then switched over to it. Also, what's part of that is that the technology is very nascent. So, for example, when ChatGPT first came out, it was quite inaccurate, and there were a lot of things, a lot of issues around latency, a lot of issues around cost. Many of those things are getting better and better and better, and we can see it kind of evolve. But we're still at the bleeding edge area. Like, so one of the things we do is that we take a learning objective and we automatically go create a pedagogically strong course module out of it, and we create the videos for that as well automatically. And so doing that, we had to do a lot of work to get AI to be pedagogically strong. Because its tendency is just to give you the answer, and so we had to do a lot to make it so that it is following strong pedagogy, and both in terms of what it's teaching and in how it's interacting with the student. The other tough part is around visuals. You can see that there's a lot that's advanced with visuals with AI, but the problem is a lot of the visuals are very cinematic. So you can produce some really amazing cinematic experiences, but if you want to produce something that is educationally sound, like a diagram that you can use to teach or an illustration that you can use to teach, is much more complex and it's not quite there yet. And so we're kind of working on a stack that is changing every single day and working at the very, very edge of that. The market challenge is, how do you get people comfortable with this? I think that understandably, a lot of the education market, particularly institutions, many of them are fearful of AI. Many of them look at AI and they see students kind of using it for purposes that they wouldn't want students to use it for, and not getting them to learning. And so how do we convince them that this is a way that students actually can learn and can actually dovetail with what they're teaching in the classroom, something that is a friend of faculty, and can help faculty get their students to where they want to get their students to. That has been a big challenge for sure.
You referenced some of the data that you've seen with Western Governors Association, but talk more about like what you're able to show in terms of student outcomes, engagement, so forth, and also for faculty, what it's doing for them in terms of making nobody wants their life to be more complicated. They want it to be simpler and more effective. They want to
Yeah.
be able to do what they do that better, faster, cheaper. So how do you look at both of that, and how is that progressing?
Yeah, so starting with the student side, I think the key part there is engagement. How do you make it so that students really want to use this and they're using it in depth? And I think that's one of the biggest stats that we've seen. Like, for example, if you look at the average amount of time that a student would typically spend on a video, it's usually in the few minutes range. If you look at the average amount of time that a Western Governor student is spending with Chiron, it's in the 20 plus minute range. And so it's way, way more than what they would typically do with like a 30-minute module. And so I think that's one indication that students are really kind of getting into this. They're getting value out of this, and are getting to where they want to get to. The next big leap with this is to show, does it actually help students, complete the course in a in kind of a larger way. So does it increase course completion rate? Does it increase, student retention, those kinds of things? And that will take a little bit of time. I think it's going to be taking a little bit of tweaking to figure out exactly how do you insert this with which kind of dosage to get to that. But then that's where we're now starting to see more and more, where if we insert it here, this is where students can potentially get to. And I think with faculty, the thing that has really convinced faculty is that this is an extension of them. So we do two things to really make that happen. First is that we make this an extension of the course, and we give the faculty and the curriculum designers a lot of leeway to design this. So, for example, what we do is you can enter in a learning objective, and we'll create a draft of a course module for you. But then that is something that the faculty or a course designer can go and edit to whatever they want to be able to make it such that it matches with their course.
And how difficult is that to do? Yeah.
Incredibly difficult. Because the thing is that, well, for us or for the faculty, you mean?
Both.
Okay,
so before you and now after you, right?
So it's incredibly difficult for us to make it very easy for the faculty, if I would say that. So what we do is we have to train the AI to be an extension of the faculty, take in their material, be able to create a course module with their material, be a really good curriculum designer that knows good pedagogy, and spit out something that is actually really strong for the students. And what we do as a result, we make it very easy for a curriculum designer or for the faculty. We take it such that we can get them, 70 or 80% of the way there, and then they add the tweaks at the end such that they can actually get that out to the students. So we make it so that in a very short amount of time, they have a module that they can put in front of students. So we're trying to do that. And without Kyron, it becomes incredibly hard because what are you going to do about the student that needs help understanding a concept at 11 o'clock at night, which happens incredibly frequently?
Usually when they do get stuck, yes.
Yeah, and that is what we're finding is the majority of students are using our technologies in the very late hours of the evening. And so, at that point, there's nobody they can turn to. You can't go to an instructor, you can't go to a faculty member. They're just kind of stuck. And that's where we can get them unstuck. That's how we've really been able to win over faculty, is that we're supplementing them and extending them at times when they can't be with their students.
Yeah. And as you think about how fast all this stuff is moving from AI standpoint, changes in jobs, careers, even I think institutions, how do you think about staying? So you are in the front of all this. The key partners that you have. We talked about your old colleague before our Zoom with Phil Moyer, who's now the CEO of Vimeo. You've got a network of friends that are at key technology businesses, the different large language models out there. I mean, how do you think about being kind of in that ecosystem, partnering with them and staying in front of all this?
Yeah, that's something I think is an advantage that we have, particularly with many of us coming from that area. Like we have a lot of folks that have come from Google, from Amazon, and all of that. The other part of our company is that we have half of our company that are educators. And so I think one of the things we realize is that we as technologists don't know education all that well. And so we need to bring in people that do know that. What that's created is a network on both sides. We have a network on the technology side and a network on the education side that we can utilize. For example, in our case, we've done a partnership with Google. And so we now are the Google Cloud sales team and the Google Cloud team is working with us to figure out how we can get this adopted in more places and how we can use some of the latest and greatest technology that is there. And on the other hand, we can understand educators really well because we have educators on our team that can partner with educators in the field, that can partner with other companies and really show why this makes sense from a learning science point of view. And so I think both of those have allowed us to create partnerships and connections as well as trust that has really kind of driven us along.
So talk about what you see the destination here being, and then let's back up and talk about some of the key signposts on the highway that you see to get there, starting with kind of short term, but some intermediate, and ultimately that goal, why you started the business, the vision that you have, what this can become.
Yeah. So I'll give you kind of two visions of where I would see it. But one that's more of like a user point of view, and then another is more of a product point of view. And then we can talk about the signposts. So the two things I would say is anybody around the world should be able to get a college education. Anybody should be able to be certified to be able to get a job and do that effectively using our technology. From the product point of view, I want to make it such that this is almost like a Google search experience. You go and you say, I want to learn about blah, and I want to really get certified in learning about whatever it might be. You should be able to enter that into Chiron. We should be able to give you a course on the fly, and that is designed for you. It's not the physics course, it's the physics course for Michael Moe. And you can take that and get to mastery
Hmm.
in that particular area. And that's kind of where we want to get to. We want to be able to partner with institutions that know how to do this to get this out to the students that really need it. So the signposts along the way, I think the first thing is, can we do this with these institutions and work really, really closely with them to put this into the right strategic places and show that it can help students? Then can we scale it? Can we make it so that each of those institutions we work with can scale, and we can scale such that this is accessible to more and more institutions, especially as more people adopt AI. Another signpost is, can we gain the trust of, and can AI gain the trust of these institutions? I think there still is a lot of work to do there to get institutions to trust AI. And I think we're kind of at the beginnings of that, but I think we can actually start to get people more and more towards that.
So, what do smart people ask you that I haven't asked you?
I think a lot of people ask me, okay, why can't I just shove together existing AI and do what you're doing? That's kind of one thing. Like, why don't I just stick a chatbot into this and do some of the things that are there? And I think the thing that we always point out is that we really are here to teach as opposed to answer. And so we engage the student, we understand where they are, and we have dialogue that is pedagogically strong to get them to that understanding. But I think that's one thing that we do see because there's so many solutions out there with AI. We've really focused on making something that is strong for the students and strong pedagogically. I think the other thing is, where is AI going over the course of the next years? Like, I have a lot of discussions with folks in that I've always I've been working with in AI about where does this all lead over the course of the next couple of years. And I'm very optimistic about that. I think that AI can get us to the point where we can teach more students and we can get more people to be more productive. And I think that that's really where AI can hopefully lead us to. We're only at the beginnings of that. With the internet analogy that we talked about, we're kind of like in 1996 with the internet, I feel like, with where we are with AI. So there's a lot that we can do going forward, and it's really incumbent upon us to guide the trajectory of that so that AI can be very, very helpful for people.
So, I share your excitement and optimism. And absolutely. So, I love hearing that vision. What's the biggest issue or issues or friction between here and there?
I think that I think that the number one thing is going to be trust. And there are multiple parts of trust. One is showing that AI can be effective for people, that it's not just a toy, it's something that can be really effective for people in many, many areas. The second thing is to guide AI ethically, such that it is doing the right thing. One of the things I realized when I was at Google was, I realized it pretty quickly when I joined the AI group, was that this technology is the most powerful thing that I've seen in my career. Way more powerful than the internet, way more powerful than mobile technologies, all the other things I'd worked on previously. It was the most powerful thing that we'd seen. And as a result of that, it has the most potential for upside benefit and the most potential for downside. And so I think what we need to do in terms of building trust is, how do we mitigate that downside? How do we make sure that we have the right set of principles such that AI is being used for good to get people to where they need to be to really trust it as a technology?
So, what do we got to do to make sure that the bad scenario doesn't play out? How do we make sure that we create trust? What are the kind of the things that you really fear, and make the specific things that we do to make sure that doesn't happen?
I think it boils down really to two big things. The first is having a set of principles that are written out. And one of the things we did at Google is that when we started to encounter all kinds of different use cases and we started to question, okay, are these good implementations of AI or not? We wrote down a set of principles, and that became kind of the guidebook for us of where to go. And the second thing is not to be afraid to say no to things. There are going to be many ways that AI can be used that would be really, really strong and can really help people. There are ways that AI could be used that would not be strong and would be very detrimental. I think we can't be afraid to say no to those in order to say yes to the scenarios that are going to be strong and can build trust.
What we're going to do now, people, places, and things, and 1 to 3 sentences at most, okay? Who's been your biggest influence in your life?
My parents and my wife. My parents gave me this foundation of, how you can live your life with high integrity and with hard work and where that can get you to, and especially focusing on not having any fear. And my wife has been my biggest coach. She is much smarter than me, and as a result of that, I learn from her every single day in all aspects of what I do. Everything from coaching me on my company to working on normal life together.
What's the most influential book you've read?
Tuesdays with Maury. The author was talking about his professor that had ALS, and his professor was teaching him a bunch of life lessons. It taught me a whole bunch of lessons about what is really important in life and what's not.
Larry Page.
Incredibly, incredibly innovative. I worked with him very closely on a lot of different things, and he was always thinking 20 years ahead. How can this be, not something that's incrementally better, but is massively better? And also, I think a thing that is not known is, he's an incredibly strong, decent, kind human being. I got to see that firsthand, and he's a really, really kind person, humble person that it became a really, really great leader.
Andrew Ng.
Really amazing innovator and was taking the risk with AI, particularly in education, very early to figure out how it can help. I admire so much what he did at Google, what he did with Coursera, and how he's guided AI over the course of the last several years.
Your favorite podcast?
Favorite podcast? Presidential. So this was done by the Washington Post, and it gives you a snippet of every president. I'm really into presidential history, but what was interesting is it talked about the story behind the person, and you could see that each of these people are real people and not just artifacts.
Who's your favorite president?
Barack Obama. I have a lot of respect for how kind and humble he is, and his ability to inspire.
Favorite recreational activity?
I think what I would say is triathlons. My wife and I did triathlons a lot before we had kids, and it was great because I felt like I learned a lot of different things and got to use every part of my body.
Sean Payton or Mike Shanahan?
That is a really hard question. Right now, I have to say Mike Shanahan because he won 2 Super Bowls.
He brought the bacon home. Yes.
But, if Sean Payton does what I think he can do, then maybe he'll surpass him.
Okay, John Elway or Bo Nix?
Oh, John Elway. John Elway was the football behind me is a signed John Elway football. He was my hero growing up. I had a life-size poster of him on my wall, and I admire kind of how he guided a team and carried the team on his back to 5 Super Bowls.
I'll tell you a great John Elway story and Stanford story when we get together next. But
sounds great.
I agree. Well, anyway, thank you so much for the time, Rajen. What you're doing is incredible. This is a tremendous conversation. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it, Michael. Thank you.